Welcome to Petability. I'm your host, Kathy Simons, certified veterinary technician and certified canine rehabilitation practitioner.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston, licensed physical therapist and small animal physical rehabilitationist.
Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives. Hey, Chris, what's going on today? How you doing?
Hi, Kathy. I'm doing very well. What's going on your end of the planet?
I have some interesting news for you. Let's
Yeah.
see. We're recording today, which is November 16th, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did an interview with our friend, Erin the dog mom. She has a podcast called Believe in Dog. By the time this comes out, it'll have already aired because it's going to air on the 20th. But I did a whole show with her about blind dogs, living with blind dogs, the joys of living with blind dogs, everything, all things blind dogs. If you have a chance, check it out. That's Erin the dog mom, and her podcast is called Believe in Dog. And I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you're blind dog people.
Right, because that's your area of expertise, and you've got a couple books on the topic, and it's just so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you. I hope I did her right. I hope I did good. So I'll find out in a day or two or
Yes.
4 days.
And again, that's November 20th of 2023.
Yes,
because we have several years of podcasts at this point. So
it's crazy.
All right, exciting news.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks. I hope that I sound smart. So we'll see.
You always do. Kathy, you and I have been practicing physical rehab now for over 20 years with small animals. And I remember way back in the day, the early days, that we both met because we were talking about this in preparation for this show, the founder of Doglegs at a conference. And I remember being impressed with the unique products that were offered at that time and how the company started. And, like a lot of companies back then, it was a invention, shall we say, that came out of necessity. A lot of things that we used in rehab, we built ourselves, sewed ourselves, borrowed from other disciplines, and so on. And that was certainly the case with Doglegs. And then also very early on, I met this guy named Ben Blecha, who is a certified prosthetist orthotist, and he was presenting at the 5th International Symposium on Rehabilitation and Physical Therapy in Veterinary Medicine in 2008 about prosthetics and orthotics for dogs, which was a pretty new thing at that time. And then thereafter, I remember talking to Ben candidly in the vendor areas of conferences and so forth. So fast forward, here we are in 2023, and we have wanted to have Doglegs on our podcast for a long time. I would say almost since the inception of our show about 4 years ago. We like to highlight quality products that our veterinary community may not know about. Certainly the pet parents may not know about. And so we reached out to Doglegs, and lo and behold, imagine my surprise that when I contacted Doglegs, I then learned that Ben Blecha is now the owner of this company. And in fact, he now has a company called MediVet Products that is a suite of various other companies and their products. Under that umbrella is the MediPaw, Go Hero Go, which is a prosthetic and orthotic company, and Wiggleless. So he's really been moving and shaking over the last couple of decades here. And then when I further looked into Doglegs, I think it started just a few products, and now there are over 21 listed on the Doglegs website. And all of them contribute to the health and well-being of our pets. And I do want to mention here, and of course we'll include it in the show notes as we always do, that Doglegs has a unique spelling. It's DOGLEGGS.com. So when you're using your search engines, make sure you spell it correctly. But all along, Doglegs has been revolutionizing the companion pet industry by providing owners and vets with innovative, effective, and easy to use coverage and support solutions. And one of my personal favorites was when I discovered the Swim Snood, because I had a pool doing my rehabilitation, and wow, that really changed how we practiced in that the dogs weren't getting ear infections. They weren't getting hematomas from constantly shaking their heads in the water and swimming. So that was great. And I further want to mention that all the dog legs products are made in the US. So that's always an awesome thing to contribute to our local economy. For today's podcast, Kathy and I decided that we'd like to focus primarily on products for the front limb within that dog legs suite of products, and specifically the shoulder stabilization system. Because again, as a physical rehabilitationist, when I discovered this system, it was a game changer. And I've used it repeatedly for dogs in my practice with shoulder issues with tremendous success over the last 2 decades. So before we launch into our specific discussion about the products, let me tell you a little bit more about Ben's background. So Ben, MPO, CPO, is a certified prosthetist and orthotist and the founder of Hero Braces. Ben received his training in orthotics and prosthetics at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. As a certified orthotist prosthetist on the human side, his work experience included a stint at Shriners Hospitals for Children, Greenville. Ben's personal experience with osteosarcoma, bone cancer, and amputation feed his drive to help others. When introduced to Dr. Robert Taylor of Animal Planet's Emergency Vet Show, Ben was asked to consult on a project for a dog named Triumph. Ben learned of the limited options available for animals with limb injuries and deformities, inspiring the founding of Hero Braces. So, Ben, welcome to Petability.
Welcome, Ben.
Well, thanks so much. All these things that you're bringing up is a flashback of a few years ago already. I think back, it's been a while since we've been doing this together, haven't we?
Yeah,
Right.
We've all
right.
grown up together.
It's really exciting to me to see. I think when I started 20 years ago, there was a core group of companies that kind of started at the same time with us, and Doglegs was one of those companies that has grown with us over the decades, making better products, better adaptations for our patients, and just overall just making the lives of our patients better. So I'm excited to have you today, Ben. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's always excited to talk about what's going on and how the world's changed, right? We've seen a lot of changes, and hopefully for the better.
Definitely. I cannot believe how many offerings there are under the guise of Doglegs now. And so tell us a little bit, tell our audience, like, why did you look into acquiring Doglegs? How did that happen? And when did that happen?
Well, so we just closed on it to end of August. So 2-3 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah. We've been friends with Doglegs for a lot of years. So actually that meeting you talked about, the fifth symposium, that was kind of my introduction to a lot of people out in the industry. I had mostly just been working in Denver with Dr. Taylor and Carrie Adrian. So then I spoke at that breakfast meeting, and I had all sorts of people coming and asking me to work with them. And the Hero Braces focuses on custom bracing, so more rigid plastic braces that are custom fit that way. So, but there's a whole spectrum of bracing, soft braces, back braces, that we weren't even touching. I kind of got overwhelmed after that meeting because, I had probably 40 or 50 different designs that I had talked about in that meeting. But once I tried to start working with the whole world, you can spread yourself pretty thin. So I decided I needed to focus on 3 braces, the stifle, the carpus, and the tarsus brace. And that's what we've really grown with Hero. But then over time, we're all small companies in this. And so it costs a lot to go to these big conventions and everything. So I started reaching out to Doglegs and Wiggless and some of these other companies that had bracing solutions that I thought that were good, but weren't necessarily competing with me, and said, hey, why don't we work together? And if we have like a catalog, if you're at that meeting, you can share all of our stuff. And if I'm at that meeting, I can share everything. But then a lot of these owners said, well, that's a great idea, but I'm about ready to retire. So what was a transition look like after that? And so, Wiggless was the first one that we brought in with that. And then, I'd been talking to Doglegs for years. I went and visited their facility, their manufacturing facility out in Pennsylvania, I think in like 2016. I mean, they're wonderful out there. And like you say, everything's made in the United States. It's, we have control over more of what we're doing that way. And so just over time, it's made sense to start bolting these together. And now we kind of have a full spectrum of bracing, and with that, a full spectrum of coverage products to, kind of replace the cone or some of these elbow hydroma or something that's more of a callousing problem. You need some protection. And so we have a full gamut of those now.
That was one thing that really struck me, was how each of the lines complements each other. And I saw that you have like starter kits for veterinary practices and things, where you have, like a suite of products that all go together in various sizes or what have you. And I think that, bracing kind of makes sense, I suppose, to our listeners. But what do you mean by coverage products, and why is that important?
Well, most people don't like the cone of shame, right? The e-collars, and this the dogs don't like it. And so the big thing that we're trying to do is trying to keep the dog from licking a wound, so the bacteria in their mouth don't cause an infection and those things. And we don't want them chewing at it either and opening up incisions. But there's a lot of these products that are braces that we can make out of a thicker material that protect those wounds and keep them infection free. And so you don't have to have the cone, and you actually cover them. And that's where the coverage comes from. And so that's really where dog legs started. So Sean Gross actually started Dog Legs years ago, and I met her at that meeting, and it came from elbow hydromas. So just dogs lying down, and they're putting so much pressure on their elbow. The body, what it does is it creates a callousing over that area, or bursa, or whatever. Basically, the body's trying to create more padding over a bony prominence. And so, the veterinarian said, hey, well, think about like knee pads for volleyball players. Could you be something like that? And Sean's a wonderful seamstress and an inventor. And so she started creating those coverage products for the elbow. Well, then how do you hold it on? And so you need to have something over the shoulder. Then all of a sudden, it starts morphing into helping things like shoulder instability. And so then it kind of morphed into some bracing lines as well in what she was doing. And so that's what you talk about. There's 20 plus products and some of them have dual purposes in what they're doing. So from the rehab standpoint, we understand that we want to support something, but just from a general practice standpoint, sometimes you just need to protect an area of the body so those wounds can heal and they can get on playing too.
I remember I met Sean when she very first started Dog Legs, and we were at a very small venue conference, and she was there. She just had a little table with her products out there. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is a great idea, because do you know how many times as a veterinary technician I've tried to cover an elbow with like a sock or a vet wrap or anything else that I had at my disposal, and it always slipped off. It was never effective. I thought it was a great idea, and hygromas can be difficult to manage if they open up and they split and they bleed. So I think this is great because it goes with you. It's like elbow protection that travels, right? Because you don't have to bring your rug or your dog's bed or to the groomer.
And it's really well engineered too. I remember, I think I called or something, and I was like, well, the pads are down below the actual olecranon that it's trying to protect, and they're like, is the dog standing up? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, well, it's designed that way, because then when the dog lies down, their elbows just cup right into those pads. And I had the dog lie down, and sure enough,
Brilliant.
So,
yeah.
I mean, all those little things. And, I think it's important here too, to say that's why you have to be very vigilant as a shopper of any kind of product like this, because quality varies so widely, and there are always knockoffs that you can find on the internet. And so make sure you're getting the product that you truly want to get, because oftentimes you get what you pay for.
So Ben, we really wanted to focus or highlight one particular item that Chris and I really love, and that's the Doglegs shoulder stabilizer. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that. What is it? What's its function? And who's a candidate for it?
Basically, there's two different designs. One has part that goes over the top of the shoulders, and then the other has like a vest. And those are usually how it's anchored to the body. And then it has this piece that comes down over the shoulders and down to the elbows, but then there's a hobble that goes in between the legs. So if you think about medial shoulder instability is like the first place that you start with this. And medial shoulder instability, a lot of it is those muscles on the medial side of the shoulder blade and everything, they're weakened. There's maybe ligamentous damage. And so a lot of what will happen with that is that you start to abduct the limbs. And so we're trying to keep the limbs adducted, so added to the body. And so that's why we have the hobbles in between the legs to help pull them in. And so you're trying to keep that joint capsule snug while you're doing your therapy and your soft tissue can heal. Those muscles, because they're so short, if you get them stretched way out, they have less control at the end points. All muscles do. If you think about your biceps, right? If you're going to do a bicep curl, well, if your arm's completely extended, your muscle, even though you can move the dumbbell a little bit, that's the weakest part of the range of motion. The other weak part is when you're completely flexed. It's in that mid range where that muscle's the strongest. Well, those muscles on the medial side of your shoulder are really short. And if you if you say they're an inch long, that's probably longer than what a lot of them are anyway. But if you stretch them out to 2 inches, you're at that end range, and they can't adduct the body back. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to allow some range of motion in the brace, but we want to allow the range of motion that's kind of in that peak strength area. So when you're doing your therapy, you're really strengthening that muscle, because when you try to do it on that outer reaches of it, what you really do is you just over fatigue the muscle, and then you actually go backwards and you lose muscle mass in that. So it's important to think about when you're trying to gain muscle mass, that range of motion that you're doing that in. And so, like I said, there's two different ways to secure it. There's a vest, and then there's a piece that goes over the shoulders. The piece that goes over the shoulders helps most all dogs, but there's some dogs that you just need to secure it a little bit more, and that vest is probably more the direction that you want to go with on that.
I remember also when I was preparing for today's talk that vest also can be used for holding on a hot pack or a cold pack, or you have a halter monitor system for dogs that need to wear a halter to check their cardiac status using those materials. So
yeah, so those vests, there's a lot of add-ons to that. These all just kind of build off of each other. And so we actually have another pouch that you can put the heart monitor inside, Velcro it to it where you want. But there's all sorts of monitoring devices that are the size of a kind of a large billfold. So we can Velcro those to the chest and keep that on the dog without having to walk around and follow them everywhere.
Oh, it's so awkward to keep that on. I'm glad to see that you have something that can help these dogs. They got to wear it for like 24 hours at least, and it's awkward to keep on. So
you mentioned the medial shoulder instability, as probably the main condition for which the shoulder stabilizing system is used. And within that, there are various degrees of instability, mild, moderate, and severe. And if it's severe, even moderate, sometimes they need surgery, some sort of surgical help to secure the shoulder a little bit more effectively. So it's not just flailing out there in space and causing, all kinds of lameness and things like that. It's a very tenuous joint because of the amount of mobility that it's designed to have, being a ball and socket. And so I think it can be prone to injury. But I think it's important for everyone to know that this system, the shoulder stabilizing system, is appropriate for all grades of instability, because sometimes it's in mild, then it's just rehab and appropriate use of this product. When it gets greater and into the moderate, it's used to protect, the surgery, and maybe worn a little bit longer, not just for risky activities and things like that. And then certainly post-operatively, especially when it's severe, it's very imperative that upper segment of the forelimb on the dog be kept, as you said, Ben, adducted, to allow scarring and things like that, and the healing to take place and not disrupt what the surgery was trying to achieve.
This is a great product because if you think about the shoulder, it's very difficult to stabilize that joint because of the chest and where it is. And you can't even ask a dog to rest their shoulder. It's just not possible. I think if you think back before Doglegs invented the shoulder stabilizer, we're looking at things like, figure 8 wraps and things like that just really weren't effective for keeping or stabilizing the shoulder. But there are also so many things that you can, like out of the box thinking with the shoulder stabilizer. I think immediately of some of my patients that have like mild elbow dysplasia, some of my patients that have wounds or abrasions, or maybe even pressure sores or lick granulomas, to cover those so that they don't lick and irritate them constantly. So there's so many other applications for it.
Yeah, if you think about that elbow dysplasia, that's usually winging out, and if we can try to bring that in more into alignment as well with those hobbles, that way elbow dysplasia, a lot of time you can start to get bony remodeling just because it's so far out, and
Right.
keeping that in. And so the boning remodeling happens because it's just trying to accommodate to the new joint pressures that are going on inside there, and so yeah, it's definitely with that. And it helps the whole spectrum, but I think if you get up into those more severe ones too, we also have a Velpo sling add-on to it that you can immobilize even more, or if you have post-surgical that you need to immobilize at least part of the time. I know as therapists, we generally want to keep them moving as much as we can, but there also has to be a time of, immobilization just to let the inflammation die down and some of that. And then you have your controlled times during your therapy. If you think about human shoulder surgeries, everybody walking around with that pillow, and it's basically immobilized, and then you take it out for an hour for therapy every day. And so there's some different add-ons with that we can have to help the shoulders as well.
And it can be a step down system, like you said, starting with the Velpo. And for the listeners out there that aren't familiar with that, basically that's taking the dog's forelimb, flexing it up alongside the rib cage very snugly, and securing it there. So the dog is on 3 legs. They are not weight bearing at that point. But then maybe the healing occurs to the point where you remove the Velpo part of it and they're just hobbled. And what that's going to do is it not only limits the amount of abduction or out to the side motion, but it's also going to limit a little bit of the extension. So they're not going to have a full stride. It's going to keep them in a kind of a protected range of motion during their regular activities, and really not allow crazy things like jumping or running because of that limitation. So that's inherent in that. And then the hobble part can be removed. And so, a lot of times when we have an injury of one body part, it leads to extra stress above and below that. And so maybe the elbow, has suffered a little bit and gotten some stiffness or arthritis. And so having that padding there, but also just retaining the body's own heat, can act as improving blood flow and improving range of motion and things like that, because we know that heat lends itself. So it's a very neutral, mild heat source too, that can ultimately help with comfort and mobility.
That's the other thing with it, because the way it is strapped on, even if you do need to do intermittent icing, like you can slip ice packs underneath parts of these to be able to do that, right? You 20-minute ice session or whatever. So it's not not overwhelming with it, and it's something that can secure it on more than trying to do an old ACE bandage that we did or something like that before.
Yeah. And even when you'd have your dog lay down and try to put like an ice pack on their shoulder, if you looked away for a second or took your hand off of it, blunk, there it goes onto the floor. So it is really a tough part of the body to work with for so many reasons. I did want to mention some of the other diagnoses, I guess, that this shoulder stabilization system can help with. And we already talked about conservative and postoperative management of the medial shoulder instability, but also scapular fractures, both conservative management and postoperative management. And then we were mentioning the Velpo sling that when shoulders luxate or dislocate and that ball pops out of the socket there, those can be secured and allowed to scar down and things too. Usually post-operatively is when I think you would want to use it in that case. And then Kathy and I have both had the experience of working with swimmer puppy syndrome. And for those of you that don't know, these little puppies come out of the womb and they just don't have the muscular ability to keep their limbs underneath them. So literally they're on their chests and their legs are out to the side and they're trying to move and they look like they're swimming as their limbs go along the floor. So what a beautiful way to be able to bring those limbs under them. And because usually it's a matter of time, if you can get them in that good position, then those muscles will strengthen and they'll be able to support their bodies and have a, long and happy life. And to that, and two, you also have a hobbling system for the rear legs that would assist in those cases.
It's always been in the past of hobbles is just trying to find how do you strap it on? You got a rope or ACE wrap or whatever. And I think
Tape,
tape.
yeah, it's a baling wire out here in Nebraska, I think this gives a cleaner way to be able to hold that on. And yeah, a lot of things shoulder wise, it's just the shoulder is such a tough joint because if you go back and look at the hip, there's actually basically a ball and socket there, and there is in the shoulder, but the socket part on the hip is actually a part of the pelvis. And on the shoulder, it's not. It's kind of just held on to the rib cage by muscles and a few ligaments, and it's not secured the same as what the hind limb is, and so that lends a lot more to instabilities and different muscles shifting around and out of place, and so just being able to secure those better so they can heal. Going back to that range of motion, if they're out of that range of motion, it introduces so much inflammation, and they can't get ahead without stabilizing them. So
yeah, the hip joint is a much deeper socket typically, unless they have hip dysplasia. But the shoulder, even a healthy shoulder joint, is basically just a little point. It doesn't have a real deep socket. For people, I mean, the clavicle comes in there, the tip of the scapula or shoulder blade, and then the humerus all meet. Dogs don't even have a clavicle. So that's not even part of that system. So yeah, it does definitely lend itself to instability. And I think that most of the time, the conditions that are being treated with this would result from overuse and kind of poor biomechanics, over and over again, or a trauma, a slip on ice, running down the stairs and hitting the smooth wood floor at the bottom, and that limb goes out beyond its normal range and causing injury and a disruption of the body's natural deep stabilizers. So to that end, I don't think that this would necessarily be a product that would be used for prevention. Is that true, Ben?
I'm not a big fan of prophylactic bracing. I'd rather I'd rather people use the strength and maintain the strength and that they have. And that's across the board. I mean, you know, there was a study in humans for they tried to test ACL braces for like offensive linemen for football teams if they wore that. And I don't know that it really reduced ACL tears, but I think there was some evidence that it reduced medial collateral tears because somebody coming from the side and hitting them, and that was more the structural support. But those are 300-pound people like trying to beat each other up, and that's not normal life for anything, you know. I hope not. And so I think maintaining a good healthy balance of exercise and strengthening, and I think that takes care of most of it. You're going to have traumatic stuff. You're going to have overuse stuff, you know, things like fly ball, you know, you're going to keep flying into something that's got to work on some joints after a while. Right. And so
agility too. I think agility is a tough sport on a lot of dogs' shoulders.
Agreed.
But I think general strengthening exercises and isometric exercises to, you know, reduce that impact, you know, versus just flat out strengthening, you know. And so, I've never been a fan of prophylactic, which for some people, you know, the pet parents of just doing it for just in case. I don't think it's a good aspect to go work on your strengthening instead.
Well, as rehabbers, I think Kathy and I
was going to say
definitely believe in that. And
yes, absolutely.
With this particular product too, it does limit normal motion. So whenever you're limiting normal motion, then it's got to be made up for somewhere else. You know, as I alluded to before, you know, it could affect the neck, the spine, the wrist, the elbow, and we wouldn't want to do that.
Chris, to your point, you should not, as an owner, just go on the internet and buy something that's going to limit your dog's range of motion, or you don't want to immobilize a joint without talking to your veterinarian first. And I think that is one of the things I wanted to talk to Ben about. Like, is this a prescription product? Do you work with the veterinarians? Because I don't want Mrs. Smith to just go, I think my dog's shoulder needs, you know, to be immobilized and go and buy a product for that when we really shouldn't do that unless we have a diagnosis, a working diagnosis, a plan, and a company such as Doglegs that's going to help us with the appropriate type of support.
Yeah, so we try to work with veterinarians first and foremost. Every clinic's a little bit different. So some veterinarians don't want to keep this stuff on stock, or they don't want to mark something up or something like that. So a lot of times I'll send an owner to us, and then they'll make the purchase. But in general, like, I don't think if you're a lay person that just a pet owner that you would know what a Velpo sling is, right?
You wouldn't. You shouldn't.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, in general, like all this stuff, we want it working with a plan. There's people that talk about bracing causes weakness, and that's one of my pet peeves of a statement. And bracing doesn't cause weakness. If it does, you're using it wrong. So bracing is going to limit motion, and that's its intention. And some things, some you want to allow some motion, but bracing is supposed to limit bad motion for one thing. So it's limiting motion that there's something structurally wrong. So that you want to do that because the structure was supposed to limit it. Okay. So that's one thing that it does. But the other thing is it does limit some range of motion. We're trying to limit it to a more active range of motion that you can strengthen more quickly. Or if we're trying to limit it to motion completely, we take it off and we couple it with therapy. And that therapy, if you think about therapy, let's go back to muscle fatigue. Okay. So if you're trying to grow muscle mass, I'm a bodybuilder. What you have to fatigue a muscle by lifting weights before you can grow muscle mass. Okay. And you have to fatigue it to a point, and then there has to be a rest period and a recovery period. And the body says, hey, I need to be stronger. And so then it makes your muscles stronger. And there's a whole spectrum of where that is. A bodybuilder is way high on the spectrum, But somebody that just had some sort of surgery that the surgeon cut into a muscle, that muscle is still reacts the same way, and how you grow muscle mass on it, it's just way farther down on the muscle on that spectrum. So a bodybuilder might have to do 400 reps. I hope not, but 400 reps to start
dead.
building muscle mass.
Oof, yeah.
Where somebody that just had surgery might need to do 3.
Right.
Right. And but the problem is if they do 5, they kind of fall off this cliff and they over fatigue the muscle. You know, think about if you're gonna train for a marathon and you ran 20 miles the first day, what would you wouldn't be able to run for 2 weeks, right? And it's because you tore your muscle tissue down so much that the recovery period has gotten so long that by the time you exercise again, you're still in the recovery period. So as a therapist, what you're trying to do is you have an hour window of therapy. You're trying to fatigue that muscle right to that break point. Okay. And then the dog goes home. But if dad comes home and says, hey, let's go play fetch, and the dog goes and plays fetch and you get 3 more reps, it falls over that muscle fatigue, and then it goes backwards. And then the next day, mom calls and says, hey, your therapy's not working. Well, it's working. It's just you over fatigued it. So what we're doing with bracing is we're trying to limit that motion between that hour window of therapy so the leg can recover. And so that's my pet peeve when somebody says that bracing causes weakness. It doesn't cause weakness. You're using it wrong if it's causing weakness. You have to tie it in with therapy and a plan to get back to where you want to be. So
Well, and that's one of the beautiful things, I think, you know, with all these products, especially soft products, because you do have some latitude in you know, how much the limitation is oftentimes, and, you know, based on how much you tighten it or the kinds of materials used or what have you. And really, you know, to your point, Ben, we're trying to protect the dog and their tissues for those moments that aren't that we can't watch them 24/7, you know.
Right.
So I mean, it can be just as quick as, you know, like you said, dad comes home and the dog runs to the door. But if they have on a shoulder stabilization system, it's going to keep them in that restricted range so that they aren't hurting themselves and building muscle versus complete immobility. Being in a crate, you know, those days are gone. You know, even being in a you know, small room, they can potentially hurt themselves, and you know, the quality of life really suffers. So this is a way that, you know, Kathy said earlier, you know, these things can be worn, you know, and used as needed throughout the day. It always goes with them, and protecting them for those unforeseen circumstances.
Right. Exactly.
So in the case of the shoulder stabilization system, it is a prescription product, and it is because it does limit movement. But so many other products in the dog legs line are not prescription, but all of them are custom sized, or most of them. I know, like for the shoulder stabilization system, there's 5 measurements, and you recommend that a professional take those measurements and also fit the product the first time. So for that to happen, you require that the product be shipped to the veterinarian or rehabilitation office.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they have a plan outside of that, and we'll let some of that go through. But veterinary team understands where the bony landmarks are and where these measurements need to be. So you just have better outcomes. If you're gonna spend this much money on a brace and you get the wrong size, doesn't. We even know we will remake it or whatever. It's taking away from your recovery time. So it's just better to have that as a part of it. A lot of them are custom made. A lot of them, we're getting to where we've fit so many of them that we have at least a few normal sizes. And then if you're outside of that spectrum, then we can still make custom for that. And that's one of the nice things about having all of our manufacturing here in the States, that we can do that.
Ben, can you tell us a little bit about the difference in the 2 designs of the shoulder stabilizer system, the standard length versus the full length dog legs?
Yeah, the standard length is going to take care of most things for most people. The full length just comes down further down to the carpus, and if you're starting to have, you need some more support further down as well, or you're trying to cover more. But really, the standard length is gonna be 95% of what you need. I haven't looked at all the numbers, but we don't sell very many of the full length. And if you look at it, it's just more coverage down the leg. And so maybe you have a lick granuloma or something going on as well that you're trying to cover, and you just have it all in one.
I did read that for like the swimmer syndrome and dogs that have very short limbs, in order to hobble them effectively, the full length is required, just to have enough length to work with. Otherwise, it'd be way too short. So I think it said like the legs are less than 6 inches long or something like that. That's a little one.
Yeah, and Daniela she does the customer service, and we're training Tony now too. Like, they're just phenomenal in helping you. If you get caught up in that, well, should I have this one or that one? Just give a call and kind of give some details of what you have going on, and they'll help you with the difference.
Doglegs has excellent customer service. I have to say, for sure. Anytime I have a problem or a question, someone is there to help me with that. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't say enough about the team that we have, and really in all the companies that, I think people that care for dogs are generally top notch anyway. But I feel like we kind of have the cream of the crop in what we're doing. So
You really do.
I want to touch a little bit on the materials that the products are made with. And we alluded to this, but again, I was doing my homework, and I looked on the website, and this is the description. So just see if you could kind of follow along here. So both the standard length and full length adjustable dog legs are constructed from 3-dimensional fleece faced, highly breathable, 4-way stretch textile with wicking properties. This material allows for circulation and keeping the joint warm, and the elbow cuffs contain 7 millimeters of padding, which is sufficient for even giant breed dogs. The Velcro brand fasteners are used for adjustments and attachments, and they are strong. It's strong Velcro. That's always one of my pet peeves with some products is, especially when you're working with animals, the hair gets in there, and, the Velcro stickability, if you will, wanes very, very quickly. But these last a good long time. So I love the fact, I guess, that it's breathable. They're designed to stay on for a long period of time. I don't think there are many issues, if any, with like skin breakdown. As with any product, you want to take it off, check the skin, let the skin breathe even more. But, they are designed to be worn for hours at a time and last for months and months and months if needed.
So textile, there's all sorts of textiles that are coming out all the time. And so we continue to try to find, durable, good things that have more of this, the outdoor gear type feel with it. Obviously all fabric has some wear point, Velcro and everything. They can't wear it forever, and dogs play pretty rough, but that's why we're trying to find those more durable materials. But we also, it's a fine balance. So like, if you cover it, dogs don't have sweat glands all over their body, right? And so they either pant or they have sweat glands in their paws. And so how are they moderating their body temperature? And so you can keep them warmer in the winter, but in the summer you got to keep them cooler, right? And so these materials have to kind of have both of those properties. And so if we don't have just a straight neoprene that doesn't have any holes in it, it's like a padding type material that has holes in it, so you can have a little bit of both with that. They're soft. These are softer braces, so the number of skin irritation problems that you have are much lower than something like our custom Hero braces. I mean, I don't think our Hero braces are high, but it's higher than this. And so there's some more forgivability in that softer stuff, and so I think that's helpful. Velcro, we try to get the best Velcro that comes from the actual Velcro companies. There's so many knockoffs of that you don't always, other companies don't always get that. So we really try to pride ourselves in durable, simple products. Like, said in your introduction, that I'm an amputee, and if my prosthesis breaks, I'm out of commission. I can't go to work, I can't do those things, and I don't want that for anybody else. And so that's what we really try to pride ourselves in our design and what we're trying to do.
So I think one of the most brilliant things with all of these systems is that they can be put on and taken off, or the technical terms donned and doffed, with ease, versus like the old bandages and things. You can mark, how tight you're supposed to make it, using a Sharpie or, something like that. And so you always get, the same fit, versus using something like vet wrap or an ace bandage or what have you. And it is much more sanitary. I think a lot of your products have an antimicrobial component, and they can be washed and line dry. To that end, if your dog is wearing any product that gets wet, take that off of them right away, because that can cause skin issues. And make sure, even if you take it off for example, hydrotherapy during rehabilitation, don't put it back on a wet dog, because that will, trap bacteria and cause more skin problems and things like that. But that's a lot of common sense. But yeah, I mean, for me, that's the real beauty is just how consistent it can be, and how easy it is to, put on and take off. And that's across the whole line of products.
I think that the versatility of it is wonderful, because I can use it easily for incorporating it into exercises for a patient. I can also use it to stabilize them while they're using the underwater treadmill. And then if I want to, use the Medco Vet Luma, I can dry the dog off, and I can dry the product, and I can use my Luma, and then I can put it back on. So it's really easy and versatile to use in your practice.
Yeah, you want it to be versatile, and obviously there's so much hydrotherapy and everything that goes in with it. If you're going to walk in hydrotherapy with the brace, just trying to dry that off. One trick that we figured out, I think Dr. Brummett that works with us, he used to be a ski instructor, and drying stuff out is just lay the device on a towel and then roll it up just like a Swiss roll or whatever.
Yeah.
And squeeze it. And that actually helps dry it out from all aspects. And you might not get it completely dry, but you'll get it a lot drier that way before you put it back on.
You're right in terms of that drying, because like you said, it's going to contact everywhere. That compression is going to, remove it from the product and put it into, your absorbent towel. And so that's a really good pro tip. So Ben, where can dog leg shoulder stabilization systems and other products be purchased?
Well, right now, obviously doglegs.com with the 2 G's on the legs. We also sell through Patterson.
What is Patterson?
Patterson is a veterinary distributor. We have some distributors in Europe for the shoulder stabilization. Scandi Orthopedic does it in Europe. If you go to our website, you can kind of see some of our other distributors, but those are the big ones.
Ben, do you make products for cats?
We can. It's still off of measurements.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I caution with cats is I would generally just try to see if they will wear something on their leg first before you spend money on something more expensive. So just if you have a wrap of neoprene or something, just see if they'll actually wear it without trying to slip out of it before you actually order something for them.
But like to your point, though, they can be sized down appropriately and utilized. So that's cool for those cats that will put up with such nonsense. So another thing I wanted to mention is many of the products, but specifically the dog leg shoulder stabilization system, is patented. And that's a big deal to get a patent. That's not easy. So that's cool.
Yeah, fortunately, I didn't have to do all that work. So it was
Own
done.
it, Ben. Own it. No, you were
Yeah.
you were smart in your acquisition there. So that's great. So, Kathy, are we ready to
Yeah,
wrap
yeah, I
things
think
up? Or is
so.
there anything else that you wanted
So,
to ask
yeah.
or?
No, I think as we're wrapping up, Ben, I'd love to know if you have any last thoughts or pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave our audience with.
Last thoughts or pearls of wisdom.
Or is there a new product coming down the pike that we're going to see soon?
Oh,
Something that's in development. Can we be a first to know?
Yeah, I don't know that we're far enough along on any of those. So, but I can say this much. So part of what we're trying to do with bringing all these together is we want to have a full spectrum of external devices that help dogs in whether in rehab or post-surgical. And we have probably 10 other prototypes of things that we're working on, but there's a lot of innovative people in the rehab space. And, they're generally trying to focus on helping their animals in their clinic. But if they have an idea for something that they want to commercialize, we're trying to figure out a model where we can commercialize stuff for them and you still get a part of whatever we commercialize, but we can bring it into this full spectrum of things to help more dogs. And it's not just you in your niche little area that knows this cool little product. So I think that's a big part of me doing this acquisition. Like I really like just inventing the products. And so I'm kind of, as we get all these bolted together, I'm going to be focusing more on these new product designs in the coming years. So
Kathy,
I
do you
can't
think?
wait to see. I can't wait to see. Yeah.
Well, I know I'm over here smiling ear to ear because do you think Ben could help me on my special project that we can't talk about because it's so top secret?
Oh, probably. Yes. I
Yes.
think so.
Ben, I may be reaching out.
Yes.
To your point.
You probably shouldn't have said it was a top secret though on the show.
Well, it's a teaser. Again, I want people waiting with bated breath to see what I bring forth.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. I assure you.
I love top secret projects.
Yes.
Me too. Me too. Me too. Well, thank you, Ben. And I thank you so much for being so supportive to the veterinary rehabilitation community and all the products and stuff that you provide our patients with that make their lives better. So thank you.
This is a fun group to be a part of. I'm so happy I found this field. Thank you.
Me too.
And I just want to thank you for being such a nice guy. Every time I interact with you, I leave with a smile on my face, and you're just one of those great human beings. So thanks for being you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show.
Follow us on social media at Petability Podcast.
And please check out our affiliates and sponsors.
Simply go to the show notes for information and links.
Thank you and tune in next time.